For someone who is such a stable genius, Donald Trump really can't help but leave a paper trail of evidence with every crime he commits. And today, we have newly released text messages from Trump's campaign staff and his lawyers in 2020 showing this meticulous and undemocratic plan to overturn the results of the election. Now, this plan was mostly spearheaded by lawyer John Eastman, who is now in the process of losing his law license. But these are some of the most incompetent criminals I have ever seen. Like, imagine me trying to cheat on one of my tests in college, and I do that by emailing my professor asking him what's the best way to cheat on a test. Or imagine a murderer who starts posting on social media, hey, I have a bloody knife and a dead body that I need to hide somewhere. Anyone know any good places? That is literally equivalent to what the Trump campaign is doing with these crimes. Over text messages on social media, over and over, they not only give away their intent, that mens rea piece, but they just tell everybody what they're doing. I mean, there was even a case in Arizona where they recorded themselves going through the illegal process of acting like they were the real slate of electors. But this article reads, texts show Trump advisors plot to use false electors to flip states. In text messages, officials within then-President Donald Trump's campaign and lawyers laid out detailed plans for how Republicans posing as battleground state electors could spur lawmakers or Vice President Mike Pence to alter the outcome of the 2020 election, tossing aside millions of votes for Democrat Joe Biden. I think it's time to be more fierce and constantly repeat that people like John Eastman, people like Rudy Giuliani, or anybody who supports these people in their attempts to overturn the results of the election, not only are they unpatriotic, but they're the farthest thing from an American possible. I mean, obviously we all disagree with Mike Pence on a lot, but we can all admit that we're happy that he cares about the Constitution and the peaceful transfer of power. Meanwhile, Donald Trump has convinced the entire Republican Party that there was this top-down effort from all of these swing states to flip the results in an illegal way, but there is no evidence, there are no videos, there are no photos. They've done multiple risk-limiting audits and came up with absolutely nothing. Meanwhile, Donald Trump's campaign, again, left this paper trail of evidence. If there was really this countrywide scheme to make Joe Biden win illegally, I think there would be some sort of evidence somewhere. Joe Biden is somehow senile, but at the same time, he's able to orchestrate these massive plans. But back to the article. Some Trump allies have argued for 3 years that the false electoral certificates simply provided a legal lifeline in case a court reversed Trump's loss. So then, and only then, the GOP slates could be recognized. So they're essentially arguing that these secondary slates were just for Trump to fall back on just in case. But that is not true. We have evidence that that is not what they actually thought. But Trump aides' own text messages, more than 400 pages of them were obtained by the Michigan Attorney General's office and reviewed by the Detroit News, painted a different picture. On December 31st, 2020, lawyer John Eastman, who was assisting the Trump campaign, told Boris Epshteyn, one of Trump's top advisors, that if Pence rejected electoral votes from the 7 states that Biden won, but where Republicans submitted alternate electors, Trump wins 232 to 222. Okay, got it, Epshteyn replied. And it's worth noting that both Boris and John Eastman have recently been indicted, so the walls are closing in on them. Then, lawyer Kenneth Chesebro, who was leading the Trump campaign's planning around the false electors, added, the math sounds tough, but that's why it's so key that all the electors voted on December 14th. It allows us to flip states, not just tie them up to deny them to Biden. Chesebro then discussed winning one state through a court decision, getting lawmakers in Georgia to appoint Republican electors for their state and then denying any counting of votes on 1 or 2 others. It's worth noting that Biden got more than 13 million votes total in the 7 swing states that Boris and John Eastman and Chesebro were talking about in those text messages. Earlier on Christmas Day, December 25th, 2020, Chesebro sent a lengthy message about options Pence had for how to handle the vote counting, including one he described as radical, simply gaveling Trump as elected. Is Pence really likely to be on board with this? Eastman replied to the various options. Let's keep this off text for now, Epshteyn then said. Options are clear, I think, Epstein added. Remember, if you're enjoying the video and you want to help boost this content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. But the article continues, Pence ultimately didn't go along with the plans described in the private messages by Trump's advisors, and Biden's Electoral College victory was approved by Congress despite the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol by Trump supporters. On December 13th, 2020, before the Republican electors met in 7 states on December 14th, Cheesebro texted Epstein laying out a strategy focused on Pence. Cheesebro said the GOP meetings on December 14th set up the possibility of Pence not counting votes from any state where there are 2 slates, and there was never careful, deliberate hearings on the merits with evidence on asserted irregularities either in court or the legislature. So already this idea that this was a backup slate is being dismissed. These people wanted to override the results of the election, subvert the will of the American people by using this false slate of electors, but we already all know that. Cheesebro then texted, only Supreme Court could override that because he'd refuse to open the envelopes of the 6 states unless courts order him, at minimum buying time. That's strikingly different than the GOP electors serving as a mere contingency that would come into play if the courts eventually reverse the outcome in battleground states. When Cheesebro wrote an introductory email to Kathy Burden, one of Michigan's 16 Republican electors, on December 10th, Cheesebro included a statement about Wisconsin's rationale for submitting a certificate claiming Trump had won. So here's another text message from Kenneth Chesbro, I like to call him Cheesebro because it's funnier, to Boris Epstein on December 13th. And these are important to know and to understand because if you guys are like me, you'll be arguing with everybody about whether this was a real coup attempt up until election day. So Chesbro texted, December 14 votes going in sets up the possibility of the president of the Senate, maybe not Pence, maybe he recuses and it's Grassley or the next person in line who is willing to do this, on January 6th, taking the position, well supported by the language of the 12th Amendment in the historical era in which it was enacted, that according to the original understanding of the Constitution, he has sole power to both open and count the votes, and that he won't count any state where there are 2 slates and there was never careful, deliberate hearings on the merits, with evidence on asserted irregularities either in court or the legislature. So essentially, this was their plan to have Mike Pence unilaterally decide the results of the election despite the American people wanting something else. And they even had another plan where Mike Pence would throw it back to the states and have the states choose that second slate of electors and again subvert the will of the American people. But the article continues. Roman, Eastman, Epstein, and Rudy Giuliani, who is Trump's personal lawyer, were among a group of 18 Trump allies who were indicted by a grand jury in Arizona this week for their roles in the push to reverse the results of the election. The text messages, reviewed by The News, point to all 4 individuals' involvement in the planning for the GOP slate's submission to Congress over a period of weeks. Remember at the beginning of the video when I gave those analogies about how dumb these criminals are to just lay out their plans over text and even have Donald Trump saying a lot of this stuff out loud? Well, this only reinforces that. On December 29th, Epstein asked Eastman and Cheesebro what would happen if the House and Senate voted differently on which electoral slate to recognize. Chesbro replied that the scenario would likely lead to Biden winning. So Pence, Eastman replied, likely referring to the vice president's influence over the vote counting. Yep, Pence, Epstein then added. On December 31st, 2020, Epstein asked Chesbro to update a legal memo with recommendations related to what would occur if no candidate hit the 270 electoral vote threshold. My 2 cents on updating that memo. Maybe include the scenario where Pence rushes through and gavels him and Trump elected to make other options look more moderate, Chesbro said. But even though more constitutionally principled, I don't see how it could be accepted as a legitimate outcome politically. Chesbro's private messages show that he was focused on altering the results of the 2020 election, beginning just days after it occurred. On November 9th, 2020, a Twitter account Chesbro used called Badger Pundit sent a direct message to Vicki McKenna, a conservative radio host in Wisconsin, saying the Republican electors needed to meet on December 14th. As long as the legislature makes findings by the end of December that the November 3rd vote was irregular and invalid, and the Trump electoral votes should be counted in Congress, that should be enough for the Biden votes not to be counted. Chesbro also messaged a photo of himself in front of the Capitol on January 4th, 2021 to McKenna. I've opted not to storm the Capitol, Chesbro messaged. Then he added, at least not this day. That is one of the most absurd messages in this whole thread, and I could almost leave it at that, but there's one more thing that I want to read. On January 7th, 2021, a day after the riot at the Capitol, Chesbro provided Epstein with his thoughts on what he described as damage control for the Trump campaign. Maybe they're all in hiding, but it'd be nice if Trump surrogates get across that without Antifa's role in the actual breaking in, plus Capitol security, the scene at the Capitol would have been entirely peaceful. Chesbro also said Pence is a lot to blame for this fiasco. Pence wasn't upfront with Trump, Chesbro said. If he had been upfront, Trump would have known that he had no chance to win other than win in the courts or state legislatures before January 6th. If I'm right, Pence gave him false hope. That is rich coming from the guy who spent the last few months coming up with this plot for these electors to be overthrown in these different key swing states. And also, regarding this idea that the Trump campaign needs to do damage control and show that it was Antifa and the Capitol Police, I mean, I'm not going to lie, that has worked very well. I go to a lot of these Trump rallies, as you guys know, and I hear the same lines over and over about, oh, it was Antifa, it was Capitol Police that let them in. I mean, the Trump campaign really knows how to manipulate the average person. He allowed Trump to hear valid legal theories from Rudy and Eastman, which gave him hope, which was crushed when Pence suddenly crushed them at the end. Why did Pence do this? Some of the participants in the January 6th riot chanted, "Hang Mike Pence" during the event. Yeah, blame Mike Pence. Blame the entire thing on Mike Pence, even though you helped set this plot up. My name is Mockler. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like, comment a blue heart if you made it this far, subscribe with the notification bell on. Most importantly, have a great week, everyone.